I'm Alex Budak. I'm a lecturer at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, where I developed and teach a course called Becoming a Changemaker. In these challenging and uncertain times, we're faced with perhaps more change than we've experienced in a long time. And many of us are struggling with how we can make sense of the change, how we can navigate the change, and perhaps how we can even make the change work in a more positive way. So with that in mind, I've developed my 7 ways to become a changemaker during challenging times. Most people do a top 10 list, but again, we're changemakers here, so we can question the status quo, and we'll go ahead with 7. So during this video, I'd like to share 7 ways that you can learn to lead change through volatile and uncertain times. We'll start by talking about developing dispositional flexibility. We'll talk about taking a bias towards action. We'll touch on resilience and empathy. We'll talk about how you can shape culture from where you are. We'll talk about consciously choosing change. And then finally, we'll end by talking about serving others and a concept called microleadership. Altogether, I hope that this empowers you to find some opportunity in the challenges that we're facing. Of course, it's normal to be scared. The world is feeling much more chaotic than it was just a couple of weeks ago, and that's okay. Of course, you still need to make sure that you're taking good care of yourself, the public health and mental health and physical and spiritual. But let me talk to you just a little bit about how you as a leader, as someone in your teams, can make change work for you and make sense out of this change. All right, so with that, let's start with my first tip, which is dispositional flexibility. This is based on work by the psychologist Zucaro, and he looks at why do some leaders adapt to change really well, whereas others don't. So he comes up with 3 different types of adaptability. He's got cognitive flexibility, the opportunity to hold different strategies in mind, emotional flexibility, the ability to change one's disposition depending on whom you're speaking with, and then thirdly, and importantly for us, is dispositional flexibility. So what do we mean here? Dispositional flexibility is the ability to simultaneously recognize a challenging situation, but also see that there is hope. It's recognizing that, yes, things are tough. It's being real about the challenges that we're facing, but not giving up the ability that tomorrow can be better than it is today. Dispositional flexibility means that we're not just being an optimist and pretending that there's no problem at all, but it's also not giving up and saying that the world is over, there's nothing we can do. It's finding agency in our own response. It's the ability to help others and say, hey, this is a tough time. There are challenges, and to be honest about that. But meanwhile, not give up that hope. And optimism is so central to being able to lead change, to being a change maker. And so it's consciously deciding that, yes, both of those things can be true, rather than going on one extreme where you put up blinders to the world, or the other where you are feeling like there's no path forward. Practice dispositional flexibility and remaining both grounded in the reality, but optimistic about what tomorrow could bring. The second point, taking a bias towards action. So I'm inspired by the quote from the singer Joan Baez. She says that action is the antidote to despair. So as we start hearing more and more news about the growing rate of the coronavirus, as we see more cities, states, countries on lockdown, it's normal to feel some despair, to feel like things are completely out of our control. And that's something that's very scary, is when you feel like there's not much you can do. And in a global health pandemic where you're just one person, it can certainly feel overwhelming. So this is why I go back to her quote as great inspiration, because all great change makers have a bias towards action. It's not change thinking or change imagining, it's change making. And so making requires some action. We'll talk a little bit later about the types of actions that you can take, but let me just ground you here by saying that the action you take, having a bias towards action, doesn't mean doing big, huge, grandiose things. It means that if you start feeling a little bit down, feeling a little bit lack of hope or lack of control, take some action. Challenge yourself to do just one thing, whether that's a phone call to check in on a friend. Maybe that's looking out for a senior citizen and offering to go grocery shopping for them. The action itself doesn't matter, and even tiny little actions make a big difference. The point here is you're challenging yourself to not just feel despair, but you're finding opportunity in that challenge, a way that you can do something with those feelings and make it more positive. We find that there's a positive cascading effect. The more you take one action, the easier it becomes to take 2 and 3 and 4. And then you can start really doing something meaningful with your time and serving others. Thirdly, I want to talk about resilience. So we often think about resilience, and especially here in the Silicon Valley Bay Area, we have a bad habit of defining resilience as simply enduring as much pain as possible, just getting through things and going and going and going. I don't like that definition. The way I talk and teach about resilience is that it's staying strong for the long haul. So yes, it requires tenacity and grit, but it also values self-care, learning, growing, taking time to reflect, that you're finding a way to lead with purpose, that the challenges that you're going through aren't just for the sake of overcoming one single challenge or just trying to get through each day, but actually taking this time as an opportunity to grow and to learn. In resilience, it's not just about failing, it's about learning to fail forward. So in other words, I recommend that you find ways to think about how could I be taking this time to be growing stronger for the long haul. So that might be developing practices of reflection, of renewal. You might be taking time to think about how you can grow stronger. I'm inspired by Stephen Covey. He comes up with his 4 buckets for personal renewal. So he talks about renewal on the mental level, on the physical level, on the spiritual, and on the emotional. So you might check in with yourself now and think about, how am I doing on these 4 buckets? But as you face challenges, I encourage you to not just think of it as a single challenge to overcome or just a series of hurdles where you're just running hurdle after hurdle after hurdle without any end in sight, but rather think about, how are these challenges that you're facing, these obstacles being thrown in your way, how are these making you stronger for the long haul? How are you developing yourself as a better leader, as a better communicator, as a better friend, as a better spouse, a better parent? How are you taking these challenges and becoming better, not just to get through this coronavirus, which will end? How are you making sure that you're remaining stronger for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years to come? Resilience. Okay, number 4, empathy. So empathy, let's be clear, empathy is not sympathy necessarily. Empathy I define as simply being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So what you'll find during chaotic times is that people respond to change in very different ways. There's some personality tests which may show how we respond to change on the Big 5 personality test, for instance. There's one characteristic called originality, which basically is how comfortable are you with change in many ways. And so some people will find are preservers, so they kind of get fearful of change. Other people are explorers, where they welcome change and see opportunity in change. It's not that one here is better or worse than the other, but to recognize that based on both nature and nurture, we probably react to change in different ways. Now, crucially, if you're leading a team, leading an organization, empathy is so important because the way that you experience change may not be the way that your coworkers or your direct reports are experiencing change. Patty Sanchez did some great work where she found that over 50% of leaders don't consider how people will be thinking about change when it's communicated to them. So in other words, more than half of senior leadership are making announcements, talking about change, and not consciously thinking, well, how might my other employees actually be responding to this change? How might they be reacting to this change? There's a big opportunity here for you to be practicing empathy. So that means if someone is really scared, really freaking out, think about how you can modulate your message to reach them where they are, to not just focus on, these are the 7 things I must communicate right now, but thinking, how can I best communicate them to someone so that way they will be able to hear what I have to say. You might be needing to communicate crisis plans. You might be able to communicate new policies or procedures. It's not just about the content that you're delivering. It's about how you're delivering it. And empathy is a powerful place from which to start. One small tip that you might take if you need to communicate with a large, global, diverse team, rather than just coming up with the communications in your own shop, just with yourself and your senior leaders, could you build an employee advisory board that's representative of the diversity of your organization? Could you involve them and share your messages with them before you send it out to the full team? So that way you make sure you get a sense of how other people will respond to your message. Again, it's not just what you communicate, it's how you're communicating it. And empathy is the key that unlocks that. Number 5, shaping culture from where you are. So I love this concept called norm entrepreneurship. So just as I'm a big believer that we can lead from wherever we are, I also believe that we can lead culture from where we are. So norm entrepreneurship is often thought of in the international relations field. So you talk about a nation state being a norm entrepreneur in terms of how they lead things at a global level. But it also applies to individuals. So just as an entrepreneur creates and scales something new, similarly, a norm entrepreneur creates or scales a new behavior or culture within a group. It could be both formal or informal. So on the formal side, you might create a policy to make sure that remote workers get some type of benefits, or that you get some type of limits on number of hours you work, or whatever. So there could be a very formal aspect of how you lead a culture change through policy. But also, crucially so, you can also lead through informal means. So maybe it's that before you start each video chat with your team, you want to create a norm, which is that you don't just jump into the material. You take a moment to say, hey, let's do a check-in. These are crazy, chaotic times. How are you each doing? What's going on for you? And you can do that either by telling others to do it, or just by starting that behavior yourself. What I love about norm entrepreneurship is that it's inherently democratic. You don't need anyone to give you permission to be a norm entrepreneur. You can start leading it yourself through practicing the behavior yourself and reinforcing it in others. It gives you the unique ability to help shape the culture in a way that you think is best for yourself and for those around you. You don't need to be the CEO to lead culture. Even and especially in crisis, having the tools of a norm entrepreneur allow you to shape a better culture. All right, coming up towards the end, number 6, let's talk about choosing change. So just stop for a second and think, how many things have changed for you in the last couple of weeks? Is it 1? Is it 5? Is it 10? Probably more like 100, 1,000, maybe thousands of things. We think about the scale of change that you're trying to navigate right now. We're talking about change at a personal level. So at home, you're trying to manage how you divvy up space in the house for video chats with your spouse. Perhaps you're taking care of kids at home. Maybe you're homeschooling them as a result. Maybe you're dealing with challenges and changes around your physical health, around your mental health, your spiritual health. Not to mention the work that you're doing at the office as well. If you're a leader, perhaps you're forced with communicating changes, with creating brand new strategies on the fly. You're leading in the face of great uncertainty. I say all of this to remind you that we are facing so much change right now that it's normal to maybe work on one change at a time, 2 pieces of change at a time. But right now, the world is throwing at us dozens, hundreds, thousands of different aspects of change. Be good to yourself. Don't expect that you have to be perfect and create all of these changes all at once. It doesn't mean that simultaneously, as you're now perhaps spending more and more time inside, you have to figure out, 1, how to be a home exercise guru and a teacher to your kids, and be the executive that your team needs. Focus on what are the most essential changes that you need to make, that you need to lead, and focus on getting those changes right. You can't possibly try to do 1,000 things all at once. So rather than just being reactive to all the changes that are coming to us, take just a little bit of time and think about, okay, right now, what are some of the biggest changes that are facing me, or facing my organization, or facing my family, and how can I respond to those changes? Take on a couple at a time, get those really solid, develop good habits, and then move on to the next. Again, if we're thinking about resilience, the ability to stay strong for the long haul, it's not just making 1,000 changes for the sake of those changes. It's making sure that you're creating new behaviors, new actions that will serve you, ideally not just now, but also well into the future. Making sure that you choose the level of change, choose the types of change that are, 1, most important right now, and 2, that are actionable. All right, and then finally, the one that ties it all together, number 7, is to consciously choose to serve others. In difficult times, it's natural to feel fearful. It's natural to perhaps even turn inwards. And so my challenge to you is to follow one of the defining leadership principles of the Haas School of Business, which is going beyond yourself. The more you can be thinking about how can I serve others, not only will the better you'll be, but also we'll all create this society together. One of the amazing things about the coronavirus is that it has this opportunity to reunite us. We've got more and more polarization, but when we have a common enemy, this one virus, some of those distinctions among us start to disappear. There's such a big opportunity to find connections with others and to serve others. There's a concept I've developed and teach in my class called micro-leadership. We often think about leadership as one single heroic act, but I think this is wrong. Instead, I believe that leadership is really the sum of lots and lots of small leadership moments. So my challenge to you is that you will be faced with so many times, so many little individual moments where you can choose to give yourself permission to be a leader, to practice micro-leadership. Seize those opportunities. It could be small things as small as just checking in and asking a teammate how they're doing, offering to serve someone else. If you're on a tight deadline, can you be respectful and recognize that, well, hey, maybe someone needs a little bit more time here. Can you be adaptable? Can you be flexible? And can you be thinking about how you bring together your empathy and your resilience, your dispositional flexibility, all in the service of others? The more that we can choose to be micro-leaders, to practice micro-leadership, to consciously and collectively serve others, to make others better, the better off we will all be. All right, so just to summarize where we are, the 7 ways that I believe you can be a change maker, the ways that you can lead change through volatile and uncertain times. We start with dispositional flexibility, the ability to remain both grounded in the reality, but still optimistic and not losing hope for a better tomorrow. Secondly, inspired by Joan Baez, it's taking a bias towards action. It's not just sitting on things and feeling fearful, but especially the more you feel fear, choosing to have a bias towards action, to do something to serve others. Thirdly, it's resilience. So resilience here is not just enduring as much pain as possible, it's staying strong for the long haul. It's reflecting on the setbacks we might be facing, and it's not just failing, it's failing forward. It's learning and growing for the long haul. Fourthly, it's empathy. It's being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. When you're communicating, when you're leading change, remembering that we don't all approach change in the same way, and being thoughtful and conscious about how you can be communicating and engaging others in change efforts to make sure that everyone is on board. Fifthly, it's shaping culture from where you are. So talking about norm entrepreneurship, where you can create new behaviors, new culture, and you can do that both formally, perhaps through advocating for policies, but also informally, just through modeling and reinforcing behaviors. You can find a behavior that you might like to create as part of the culture of your team, and you can choose to do it. You don't need permission from someone else. Sixth, choosing change. So choosing the right level of change to work at, not trying to do 1,000 things all at once, but choosing the 1, 2, or 3 most essential things right now, and then moving on to take on more and more change as you get a chance. And then finally, it's courageously and consciously choosing to serve others. It's practicing micro-leadership, it's seizing those small individual leadership moments, all of which collectively make a really huge difference. All right, I hope that these tips have been helpful for you. We are absolutely going through uncharted levels of change, but I hope that with these tips, you'll feel a little bit more empowered, a little bit better able to navigate, shape, and lead change, both for yourself and for others. So get out there, even in difficult times, go be a change maker, help others, and let me know how things go. Be well.